action economy. What is it? So for some of the people out there, they may not understand what the hell action economy actually is. If you play something like Warhammer, where it's you go, I go, and we have our complete turns, action economy is relatively unnecessary. Don't get me wrong, there is some limited action economy, but what I'm specifically talking about today is the action economy of alternate activation games. So like One Page Rules, Mantic's Firefight, and other games of that variety. So what does it really cover? So basically, each time you activate a unit and take an action, that's part of the action economy. Therefore, having more units to activate means that you have a larger action economy than your opponent does. So if they have 7 actions and you have 10, you get 3 extra actions at the end of the turn. Now, obviously, they still get their 7. And normally what will happen in most of these games is that the person who finished first acts first next turn. Sometimes it will be initiative. And then there's some games like Bolt Action where you reach into a bag and you take dice out until you've moved everyone. In that particular scenario, the action economy is still important, but it's not as controllable as it would be otherwise. But I'm specifically going to really cover those alternate activation games, that is, you move a guy, I move a guy, then you move another guy, and so on and so forth until everyone's done. Mostly focusing on Grimdark Future, but we will touch on some of the other games. So Vamps, if the action economy is so powerful, why don't I just stack my army full of useless dudes? Well, basically, most games have what is called force organization, which limits what you can take. And the force organization rules in Grimdark Future are pretty generous, but they are limited still. You can take 3 to 4 heroes, depending on the game, and generally you can take up to 10 units. Now, this does mean that you could technically have 13 activations by taking the required number of heroes plus the maximum number of units. And of course, if it's such a strength, why doesn't everyone do this? Well, see, a lot of people say that the action economy is one of the most important things to understand about the game. I actually disagree with this. To a degree, action economy is important, but I don't think it's the be-all, end-all of every single tactical maneuver you can do. Yes, managing to get into the final turns of the games with more units than your opponent and actually able to control the board, very important, because objective play is pretty much the primary way that most people play now. That being said though, 7 really good units who are able to control the battlefield by destroying their opponent's units is a lot better than 10 crap units. Now, I will touch on the hero portion at a later point in this video near the end, so we're just going to talk about how we sort of approach action economy and what you should do. So for chaff armies, it's pretty straightforward. So for your alien hive, your human defense force, your orcs, all these guys pretty much solidly cover this particular area. More units is generally better. Now that doesn't mean only take huge units of guys, right? Definitely still take some elites. It's important to make sure that you take some elites so that you're actually able to deal damage to your opponent consistently. But for the most part, these chaff armies can get away with having cheap crap units that just take up space, because if the enemy wastes time killing them, all the better for your more elite units. And if they ignore them, then there's a good chance you have a full unit of dudes at the end of the game who can control a large portion of the battlefield. Remember, by taking advantage of unit cohesion, unit of 10 orc boys can take up a very large portion of the table. They may even be able to seize 2 objective markers just by stretching themselves super thin. So it's very important to understand that yes, having more units means that you have more objective play. So, in that case, doesn't that mean something like Battle Brothers, Titans, and Custodians are already at a disadvantage? To a degree. So, Battle Brothers can make this up by taking their cheaper units. They do have some sort of scout tier units, and these guys shouldn't be underestimated. Yes, they are not going to be as devastating as the more elite units, but I can tell you this, if you get into the end game with 2 units of scouts, those guys can actually be pretty nasty, like Pathfinders, Raiders, and infiltrators. All these guys can actually be pretty nasty if you underestimate them. Now, that being said, as I said, you don't want to have only 5 units of Battle Brothers, even regardless of how elite they are. Because basically, in this game, attrition is a thing. Attrition is a thing in any war game. And attrition means that eventually they can grind your units down. And here's the thing. Say you're up against Alien Hives, you have your 5 super duper elite units who absolutely mess dudes up. And they kill 2 of them, and you kill, say, 4 or 5 of them in return. They are still holding a large part of the battlefield comparatively to you. And particularly if you only kill 4. Like, if you only kill 4 of their 10, 6 units on round 4, that's hard to sort of stop them from taking battlefield control. Even if your guys can kill 3 of their units, it's not looking good for you. So it's important with your more elite armies that you take lesser guys so that you can make up the thing. For me, the sweet spot for Grimdark Future is somewhere between 7 and 9. If you can get 10, fantastic, awesome. But if you can get at least 7 in elite army, 7 activations, you're probably not going to be as stung badly as some people may make it out to be. In Age of Fantasy, your points value is lower, but you still get the same number of activations. So Age of Fantasy is 750 to 1,500 points for standard games, and you still get the same amount of activations as a 2,000 point game of Grimdark Future. Let's talk about the super elite armies. Titan Lords and Custodian Brothers. Now, these guys, once again, I feel like these dudes are better as sort of companions to other armies. So, like, you could take a unit of Custodians in Battle Brothers or Human Defense Force or something like that. You know, and then you sort of make up that gap. Same with Titans. I'd recommend only taking, like, a Titan as a Dreadnought sort of spot in other armies rather than actually trying to make a Titan Lord's army, because you're just going to end up way too far behind the action economy. This is when the action economy actually starts making a big difference. Because, you know, you could probably get, like, maybe 4 units of Custodians, or maybe, like, 3 Titans in a 2,000 point game. You're just going to be way too far behind. It's not going to be worth it. Even against something like Battle Brothers, you are just too many points behind on those guys to really properly be able to get battlefield control down. You'll absolutely murk enemy units. Like, they'll just die. But at the end of the day, you won't kill them fast enough, and they'll just be able to cover more space. Hey everyone, Present Vamps here, just interrupting the video very quickly. If you are liking the content, please like and subscribe. It really helps channel out, lets me know I'm moving in the right direction. Also, I just want to point out that for some people, not everyone, you may have access to a feature called Hype. And I'd really love it if you could hype the video for me. I can't access it as an Australian, not sure why, but it does exist. And you know, any help you can give the channel is much appreciated. Alright, back to the video. I want to cover something that I read. I had a bit of a constructive conversation with someone on the Reddit subreddit about, so the One Page Rule subreddit. And basically the question was as follows. Do you take heroes in units or by themselves? Now, for one thing, there is 2 different schools of thought, in my opinion, on this particular one. And they basically come in this. Grimdark Future and Fantasy have very different reasonings behind why I think yay or nay for adding heroes to units. So let's talk about the advantages. You get more action economy if you don't add a hero to a unit. So that's great, like that, and they can still claim objective markers and do all that fancy stuff, and they can also sort of, if they're casters, they have a bit more flexibility. You know, they don't have to ride with a unit, then they can buff a lot easier and take cover by themselves a lot easier. The disadvantages, of course, is that they're vulnerable to being attacked by themselves. If they get into a fight, most people who are single heroes in a fight, it doesn't go well for them. They get overwhelmed. And also, they can get picked off by, you know, just weaker units in general because they can just pump firepower into the person and they go down. Now, that being said, I do believe that Age of Fantasy, it's much safer to have, say, a caster rock off by themselves. Why is that? There's just not as much shooting. You have to take whole units of shooting guys, like archers and stuff like that. Most people have regular dudes with swords, or hand weapons and shields, right? Or maybe spears and shields. So it's a lot easier for that caster to go, oh, well, I'm not going to deliberately leave myself in close combat range against this unit, comparatively to, I just won't go near that unit of archers, right? And when you really sort of break it down, maybe the opponent has like maybe 2 units of archers, maybe they have, an artillery piece of some description. Grimdark Future, on the other hand, I think is a lot more dangerous to keep a unit by itself. And that's because everyone's got guns. Everyone, their dog has a gun, right? In fact, some dogs do have guns. But also snipers are way more active in Grimdark Future. Almost every army can get a sniper unit. That's not true for Age of Fantasy. Snipers are rarer. They do exist, but they're rarer. Now, that being said, is that, a sniper can pick off a hero in a unit anyway. But having a unit by themselves means that something like a tank with a laser cannon can pick them off very easily as well. Or just a unit of infantrymen with a laser cannon can pick off a hero who's just staying out by himself. So I personally think that, yes, action economy wise, having individual heroes is much better. But is it really worth it if they die? If I'm taking a caster hero, I want him to be able to do his job. And outside of that, if I'm taking a hero to buff a unit, they're going in the unit anyway, so... Yeah, so action economy is a big thing, and you can definitely improve it by separating your heroes out from your units, but keep in mind that they are more vulnerable to getting killed. So, yay or nay, however you feel. Play a few games with them, not in a unit, play a few games with them in a unit and get the feel out for them. Me personally, I think casters by themselves aren't so bad, but if I've got a regular sort of captain guy, he's going in a unit. He's not he's not being left out on his own. So that being said, action economy overall. How important is it? It is reasonably important. But I do think that it's not the be-all, end-all of games. I think the action economy will come into play if the skill discrepancy is higher. So, for example, if you've got a really experienced player facing a younger player or a less experienced player, if the more experienced player has a larger group of units to work with, they're probably going to find it much easier to control the battlefield and keep control of it. While the lower level player is probably going to struggle. But I think if the reverse happens, I think if you give the less experienced player the Horde army, they're still going to eat it fairly effectively from the more experienced player. It'll be closer than it would have been if it wasn't, but I think they'll still struggle. So I think that's the thing, is that at the end of the day, it really comes down to list building. It's important to understand how to build a list. So my rule of thumb is if I'm playing 2,000 points or 1,500 points in Age of Fantasy, no less than 7 units. No less. Like, if you have less than that, you're going to struggle. And preferably, you should try and get higher. And for me, I'll say that I do think that 9 units is kind of the sweet spot for me. I like the idea of being able to get 10 units. That's great. 10 units and 3 heroes. Fantastic. But as I currently stand, I think 9 heroes is kind of like that nice zone. Because generally you got a nice amount of elites, but you got some cheap units that you can throw away. So yeah, just remember that it's really all about balance as far as it comes to action economy. You want to try and get as close to your opponent as you can, but you don't want to be sacrificing what makes your army special either. So, if you are Battle Brothers, 7 is perfectly fine. 8 if you can do it, but you want to have your nice elite guys to control the enemy army for you and let your cheaper, crappier guys control the battlefield. Let them take up space. That's all I've got to say on action economy. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do really appreciate it. And I'll catch you on the next one. See yous.